Before we get started, just a reminder that you can find all of my available rental properties on my website at marcguzman.com. If you own investment property, click on the Owner Services section to see our complete list of services. This episode and wine tasting is sponsored by Lanny with Prime Lending. Lanny is a loan officer specializing in residential home lending. He communicates with you every step of the way, and his honesty sets him apart from the rest. He's able to think outside of the box due to his experience and is able to tailor a loan program to fit your needs. If you can't qualify just yet, not a problem. He will let you know what you need to do in order to be ready. Lanny is also backed by Prime Lending, which is one of the biggest and fastest growing lending banks in the nation. They have simplified the home lending process down to 5 steps. And FYI, step number 5 is to relax and enjoy your new home. So contact Lanny Clark today at 510-964-0620. With 2018 wrapping up, the housing and financial markets have a lot of questions surrounding them. What will interest rates look like in 2019? What will 2019 bring for California in terms of the housing crisis? How might trade wars impact housing? Today, we have Lanny Clark of Prime Lending to help us answer those questions and more as we look ahead to see what 2019 might have in store for the California housing market. Well, Lanny, thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Again, this is how many times?
3.
3 times.
We were number 1, number 100, and I don't know what this one is.
Is this going to be 200?
187.
Oh.
Ooh, close.
Close.
Unless you want to postpone it to 200.
I'll come back.
Yeah, we can always come back.
I like it. It's the best podcast in the area, so you know.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So, how's business been?
Business is good. It's been a challenge. The markets are changing for the first time probably in a decade. We're seeing sellers overprice and having to drop pricing. Creative realtors are out there underpricing, sometimes by $100,000 to get activity, and people think they're going to get that discount, and they had no intention of selling it. And mortgage rates are all over the place. As we know, the Fed's raised rates yesterday.
Yeah. It's funny you say discounting, because there's still a lot of people that think they can do the multiple offer bidding war.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll work in some areas, some neighborhoods, and some properties. But the property has to be fantastic. You got to be in a unique neighborhood. I really don't see that on just your average listing these days anymore.
Well, I would agree with that, but the exception to that is when someone comes in and offers it for $100,000 less, and then everybody on the internet does the research and thinks they're going to get a $600,000 house for $500,000, and they all want to buy it, and it's going to go for $585 to $600. It's like they're just doing that to create the momentum. So I consider that artificial. Mm-hmm. The real ones you're talking about, the real bidding wars, the Berkeley Hills, the Kensington stuff, unique properties, unique neighborhoods in our area, that is different. But I'm seeing them try to bring that technique into other areas. And it's only when they're offering it underneath. I've got a friend of mine I do a lot of business with. He often advertises properties for $100,000 less than they want. His average is 5 offers, and his average is 110 over his list price. So he gets his clients what they want plus some more, but he's mostly a hills guy. Mm-hmm. So, as you say.
Yeah, and the hills are very desirable because, well, that's where all the nicer homes are, the views, and it's more remote.
And you can see the bay.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And you know what? We didn't even pour the wine. We're going to have some wine. So I have to thank you, Lanny, because you are one of the show sponsors and you're a wine sponsor. So whenever we have a bottle of wine on the show, it did come from you. And so thank you. And so for a lot of the viewers and listeners, if you don't know who Lanny is, he's a great loan officer, Prime Lending, and he's located in Pinole, but you could essentially do loans anywhere and refinances.
Anywhere in the country, yep.
And if you need someone to refinance your house, or if you're in the market to purchase 1 to 4 units, contact Lanny. He's your guy. Now, what if someone wants to purchase 5 or more units? Is that something your office can handle, or you have a partner?
So Prime Lending doesn't offer those directly. We do have some broker channels that we can do that through. And we can do those in all 50 states. I am also a licensed broker. So I have resources to help the clients that do that. But we are primarily, and Prime Lending itself is a 1 to 4 only unit property type of financing.
Okay. Sam? So for many new viewers and listeners, we love to drink wine here on the show. Just get in front of the camera. Okay. So the market is changing though. Like it's changing dramatically. Like in just the last 6 months, I feel like around June, July is really when I started to notice a change. We started to see inventory coming more on the market. You started to see a little bit more talk about the tax reform that capped property taxes and state income taxes for like California. Then you started to really notice the effects of interest rates rising. So, how's your business though in the last 6 months? I mean, have you seen a slowdown in business? Have you seen maybe just a different type of mentality, but same amount of business?
That's an interesting question. Yes, there's multiple facets to it. I am seeing less purchase money right now. There's less people out there buying than were before. There's a lot of sellers that still seem to think it's a seller's market. And everybody thinks their house is worth more than the guy down the block, and they'll be happy to tell you why. And so I saw a lot of sellers overpricing their houses. And then they try to blame the realtor when the realtor can't get them their number. But we've noticed this in the market. All of a sudden, there's a whole neighborhood where everybody's $25,000 overpriced.
Mm-hmm.
Then the first one that comes down is one that sells. So they're establishing the new values, and I wouldn't say the market has receded, but it has definitely plateaued. It has gone over. I think we're back to what I consider a historical cyclical market. You run up in summer. Once you hit daylight savings around Halloween, it starts to cool down. There's typically about a 5% drawback during this time of the year. And then once daylight saving ends, you get back into March, and then the home buyers come back out. And it is psychology, as you're saying. Let's face it, you're looking to buy a house when it's dark. How are you going to go out? You get into November. Now it's dark at 5:15.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no one wants to go out looking at houses this time of night. So the sellers that are on the market right now are actually motivated. So there are some great deals out there right now. Anyone who lets you in their house between Halloween and New Year's is a motivated seller. And so there are good deals to be out there, but people pull them off the market. There's less inventory out there. I do see some buyers, though, getting more motivated and changing their mentality that they finally come with the idea, well, rates are not going to go back down into the threes. We probably will never see that again. We have had a huge recent rally in interest rates. Interest rates are the lowest they've been since early spring, the time that you were talking about. And in fact, yesterday, let's talk about the elephant in the room. The Feds raised rates.
Yeah.
Rates went down today.
Yeah. It hit a 3-month low, I heard.
Hit a 3-month low. Rates went down. The reason for that being is Wall Street had already anticipated this. 71% of the economists out there thought this was going to happen. They pre-priced it into their loans beforehand. Then the stock market tanked. So that allowed rates to go even lower.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's no direct correlation between the stock market and the interest rates, or the bond market, the 10-year bond is our major indicator, and the interest rates, they trend with each other. And as the stock market comes down, it drags rates with it. As the stock market balloons up, it drags the rates up. So, as Sam and I were talking about before you came in the room, this increase is not going to have anything to do with the floor of the interest rates, but it will raise the ceiling. So now when the stock market takes back up, rates will go back up to where they were potentially, and maybe that quarter point higher. But right now, today, with we've given back all the gains we had for the entire year.
Yep.
We keep trying to fight that trend, and then it bounces back
I
down.
want to say the Dow, while we record this, is down 400, 500 points.
Yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if we don't rally back 300 of that or more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the new norm in the stock market. And it's getting away from the Obama administration's way they manipulated the financial markets. And under the Trump administration, like it or not, they brought back volatility. And volatility is what creates these wild swings. When we used to have a stock market, when Obama was in it and was at its lowest, we're around 8,000. A 100-point swing then was not nearly as big. Now, we were up at 27 at one point. So you just look at the math, that's almost 4 times higher. So if you have the same 100-point swing, that's now a 400-point swing. So I think from a percentage standpoint, it's not nearly as unexpected as people think. But people just remember the old numbers and the smaller swings. And, you got to get in at the right time, get out at the right time. But let's face it, real estate's still the number one thing. They can't build any more land. We live in one of the most desirable places on the face of the earth, and everybody wants to live here. As you and I both know, being in leadership for the local association of realtors, we have a terrible housing crisis, and particularly in the Bay Area. But statewide, and we were talking with Jerry Brown up there at the meeting when you were I both up there last year, he said we're 80,000 units, housing units short per year in the state.
No, 80,000 short?
Short. We have that many more people moving in than we are building. And that's why they've gone to the ADU, the accessory dwelling units, the granny units, as hopefully a way to solve some of this. But yeah, California's the worst in the entire country as far as the disparity between the people that want to come here versus the people that are leaving in the housing market that we have. And the Bay Area just being constricted like we are, we're one of the largest economies on the planet. We're short. A major portion of that's here.
Yeah, I had a conversation with someone the other day who was asking me about Prop 10 and how Prop 10 failed and how they thought Prop 10 would actually have helped the housing crisis. And just for a quick reminder for many of the people, Prop 10 was to ban and repeal the Costa-Hawkins Act. That would have allowed rent control jurisdictions to then expand rent control to single family homes, condos, townhomes, and also place restrictions on vacancy decontrol. And they would also be able to expand it to any new construction also. And so they were disappointed that Prop 10 had failed. And so I started to break down and explain to them because they had a few questions. They had listened to a few episodes of my podcast. And so I started breaking down to them how complicated the housing crisis really is. It's not a simple black, white, oh, here's a solution, this is going to fix everything. It's very complicated. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, it's a simple reason why we have a housing crisis, and it's supply and demand. Like you said, we're not keeping up with the inventory supply. You have a high demand, simple economy 101, you have prices that are going to go up. But how do we fix it? And that becomes a much bigger issue because you have people that state they want cheaper rent, cheaper housing prices to be able to afford to live in California. Great. I think everyone is for that. How do we do it? Well, we need to build more housing. Great. Let's go ahead and build more housing. Now we run into the real problem. Now we run into people that say, hey, I'm okay having an 80-unit complex in the city, but I don't want it in my neighborhood, right? I want it over there.
I got a friend going through that right now in El Cerrito. There's El Cerrito development belt off of San Pablo Avenue between the BART tracks and whatnot, and they're allowing the high rises, and him and his family lives in a small one-story, and they want to put a 12-story building across the street and basically lock them in. And he's thinking I may just sell because I don't want to live in that neighborhood. But as you said, we have to have the housing, and multi-unit housing is where we're going. Americans, we've been spoiled for a long time. We had the Great Wild West and the plains and all this land, and what's really happened is we've now taken our population, we squeezed it to the two coasts. Most of Middle America is not doing very well. There are some benefits with some of the tariffs that we've done and put some people back to work in Middle America. They saved some factory towns, but the flight is to the two coasts where we live in on the East Coast. And we have huge, what is it, square foot per person personal living space over most of the rest of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know our number, but I know in China, your personal living space is 1 square meter. I mean, that's it. That's your personal living space.
I read an interesting article on nano units in Hong Kong and how these nano units are about the same size or maybe even smaller than this little studio room that we have. And they sell for $500,000 to $1 million. But there's so much you can do with it, right?
Right.
You can easily move furniture around. Furniture's attached to walls, and it's very neat how they design them. But they're also starting to see, and this is what the article was about, they're starting to see a dip in prices over there and less demand because people are getting tired of living in these very tiny units. But going back to what we were discussing is, yeah, you're 100% right in that we have a really high square footage per capita, right? And a lot of that problem came about in probably the boom after the automobile vehicle, where it just allowed, when more and more people started to be able to afford a vehicle, and it was no big deal. Gas was so cheap, you could easily drive down 2-3 miles, and things started to get built out just wide apart. But then the problem is, now we've gotten to a point where it doesn't make financial sense anymore to to own very high cost vehicles, to travel and pay very high gas costs. Transportation costs is very expensive. And so the solution to it is we have to either build cheaper and much faster transportation to where we can go from here to, let's say they develop a giant commuter town in, I don't know, Bakersfield or something, but you can travel from Bakersfield to San Francisco in a matter of 30 minutes to an hour. Then you would see a big expansion of Bakersfield and a lot of the empty land that California and the US has. You'll see a big expansion, but you have to have very quick and cheap transportation. And if you don't have that technology or don't have the ability to build it, you're then left with, okay, well, we have to develop in the areas that are already developed where people want to live, which is along the coast and in major hubs where the jobs are. And that comes down to Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area.
Well, you know my wife. She's a senior manager at Siemens, and she only works at Ashby in Berkeley, right off the freeway in Aquatic Park. You know, her office window opens, looks over Aquatic Park, the bay, the bridge, beautiful spot. It is 12 miles, and her average commute is 45 minutes a day. And if she goes in the teeth of the traffic, it can be as long as an hour and a half. The 80 here is one of the worst commute corridors in the entire country. It bounces between 1 and 5 every year, and it's tough. You know, it is really tough. So even with a short commute like that for most people, you go to the Midwest. I know people that drive 50 miles each day, but they're at freeway speed. They're still at an hour or less.
Yeah.
We don't do that. But we have a unique paradigm, and I got to see a lot of this firsthand when I was coaching the U.S. judo team traveling the world. In most other countries, the rich people, the affluent people, the business people all live downtown. And they have the smaller properties, and they have the condos and that little compounds and so forth. And they make the poorer people live up in the hills. And they have to come in and out to do the work. And we see that all over the world. Brazil is one, all the things up in the hills and so forth. We're the exact opposite. We actually went through, it was part of the Renaissance, the beginning phase. I forget the term of it. But when it went down, people fled the inner cities of Oakland and San Francisco, all moved up in the hills into the higher areas, and actually let those areas go down. And now what we're seeing is we've gone out so far that people don't want to go out any further, and they're not coming back into those cities. They're getting the Renaissance. They're rebuilding them.
It was a boom. It was a boom of the California suburbs.
Commercial. And yeah, so the suburban boom has slowed down, but now we're seeing the boom down like Jack London Square, where every building is 10 stories tall, beautiful luxury condos. You got your commercial down below, the restaurants in the building, your gym is in the building, your dry cleaners in the building, and we've switched that around. But we were really one of the only countries that we sort of like abandoned our inner cities for about 30 years, and everybody did the whole suburban boom and up into the hills, and now no one wants to drive because of what you're saying. So now they're going back, they're taking less square footage, it's high end, and just look at San Francisco. I mean, all the skyscrapers there. My wife and I were amazed when we went to New York City last year. They're now building skyscrapers on the other side of the river, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, the same size skyscrapers they have in Manhattan.
Wow.
Because they're just off the bridge. They're not having to go further out. So it is a psychological and a physiological change with the way we're doing things. We no longer want to drive an hour, hour and a half to and from work every day. I'll take less space and have a better quality of life with my family. I want to be home to have dinner with my kids. I want to go see my daughters play. So I do think things are coming a lot full circle on that. But it is unique. America's different. Remember, we're still a baby country.
Yeah.
I remember going to Ireland the first time. I was always told I was Irish, and I got over there. They're like, no, you're Clark, you're Welsh. Hey, wait. My family's lived here 700 years. Yeah, you're a Johnny-come-lately. Then I had to pull out my grandmother was a Maher, who's their most famous general in World War II, was Miss General Maher. So then I was accepted as being Irish. But 700 years as a Welshman did not count as being a local in Ireland. It was really kind of funny. But we're still a baby country. We are the melting pot, especially where we live. I mean, we accept everybody. We love everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, what you are. If you're a good person, you will find a place here in Northern California. It is that simple. But the housing issue, as we're talking about, is getting different. The other thing that I've talked about in the past, and I know you and I have had some of these conversations, is we're getting away from that post World War II baby boom mentality.
Yeah.
That was the one where everybody came back. That's when we created the 30-year mortgage. The 30-year mortgage, people, I hate to tell you this, is never a good idea. It's become a staple of our economy. I still have one. I got another 15 years on mine. Back in the days when they didn't have a 30-year mortgage, housing prices were capped because it was a lot harder to get financing. They did that so the veterans could come back, the GIs from World War II, start families, own homes, and rebuild our economy after World War II. But you don't pay off your mortgage. That's a dirty secret. It takes about 23 years to pay the first half and 7 to pay the second half. And with the way people are financing things, it's changed. People are no longer willing to do it. That's why the current millennials, we talk about this all the time. They're the largest pent up demand for housing, more than the baby boomers at World War II, and they're still not starting to buy houses. And when you ask a millennial, when do you think you're grown up? The number one answer is when I have my first child. Not
Mm.
even getting married. Like for you and I,
Yeah.
you're a little younger than I am, but even with our group, and when I got married, now I'm gonna start becoming responsible, and I need to start thinking about having a family. They don't even get there until they have the family. So it's a different mentality.
It's very interesting because I grew up with that exactly what you're saying, that mentality of, okay, first you get married and you get a house, and then you have the room to expand and grow.
Correct. That's what we were taught. That's what we'd seen. That was the experience that we lived. That's what the people older than us did. And that's not happening anymore. The other thing is the two things that happened, and I get in trouble for saying this sometimes, but that also led to the mentality also of a lot of people when you turned 18, they kicked the kids out of the house. You don't see that as much anymore, especially here in Northern California. We're very ethnically diverse. Hispanics don't do it, Asians don't do it. They let the kids stay, go to college, save your money. You
Well,
know,
you're seeing more and more 30-year-olds and even some 40-year-olds still living with their parents because that it's to afford rent on your own is way too expensive, or to even buy a property on your own is very
and then you go
expensive.
back to the cost per square footage for personal living space. They're going to get more living in my 2,400 square foot home than they're going to go get on their own somewhere else and pay 3 times, 4 times what they would if they just helped me out of the family. I have a 3 generation home myself right now. I've got my granddaughter, my daughter, my son, and my wife. I'm also seeing where that we're also not putting the elderly people into the retirement centers the way we used to anymore, going back into the ADUs. And I'm actually had quite a few of these conversations recently. I haven't closed a loan on them yet, but I do specialize in renovation financing, which would include building ADUs, where the parents who lived in the house is too big for them, whatnot. The kids that have a family can't really find a property in that neighborhood. They want to be close together. So now mom and dad are building an ADU in the back, and we'll go live in the backyard. You take over the front of the house. You're going to now take over the mortgage payment. Now I have a better quality of life as the parent, and I have my own house. And we don't need a giant lawn, we don't need all this and that, but they like having separate space. And the number one development I've seen out there right now that embraces that idea is Lennar Urban. So Lennar is one of the biggest builders in the country. They have a development on Treasure Island where they've done that. They have actually built this entire development based on ADUs, accessory dwelling units. So they put mom and dad condo unit in the middle of the house. Then they built the house around it, 2 stories. And
In
there's
the
a
middle of the
in the
house.
middle of the house. And so they have a common backyard and whatnot. But there's a door they can go in and out to share the time with the family. They can walk back in and close the door. And these are, $1.5 million homes. I mean, these are not cheap homes out there in the middle of the San Francisco Bay on Treasure Island. But when you have a big builder like that that realizes this is what's going on, and I think it started a lot with the Asian cultures, where they didn't want to put their parents into rest homes and this and that. What are we going to do with them? And now this ADU seems to be a solution for a lot of people. I know my wife's sister moved back into her father's home, the family home, to take care of him as he got older because he doesn't want to go to a retirement home. He's a retired civil engineer for the city of San Jose. He's got a good pension, very low mortgage. He can do it, but he needs someone to care for him.
Hmm.
And I see more and more of that. That's that psychological change we're talking about. We're no longer just throwing our parents into retirement centers. We're no longer kicking our kids out the house at 18. We're understanding multi-generational homes. Um,
So that also brings up another point is that if you look at disposable income here in the Bay Area, disposable income for households, it's been going up the last 20 years.
mhm.
And the average or the median right now is $110,000 household income. And it's hard for a lot of people to understand because many people think, well, my salary is not 110,000. But this is based on households. And the
Mhm.
reason why it keeps going up is because people are moving in together. I
Mhm.
mean, if you're a working couple and then you have your son or daughter move back in with you and they're also working, well, now your household income just went up.
Mhm.
And so now the household itself can afford a bit more because as a household you have more disposable income. And that's something that you're seeing with a lot of the people that are moving into the Bay Area is that they're willing to, whether they're friends or relatives, they're willing to rent a house, rent an apartment together, share it, and they're able to afford it very easily. One person to be able to afford, let's say, $3,000 a month rent is extremely hard.
Right.
But all of a sudden, you split that amongst two couples, each working, that's 750 apiece, and that's very affordable at that point.
And when there's actually developments out there, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Some of them are even just condos and townhouses where they're doing exactly that. They're doing two suites, two
Correct.
master
Yeah.
suites. This is your half of the house, that's our half of the house, and then we have a shared communal area with the living room, dining room, family room together, the kitchen. But they'll do it 2 stories and literally. So
Correct.
that
Yeah.
is absolutely out there. The builders are building those. They do exist. Um, and the other thing that I'm seeing too, with agreeing with everything you're saying, is that for the first time, the other thing I'm seeing is a lot in the minority community, people that had been slightly disenfranchised, working some of the service jobs, things like that, are now in their 20s moving back home or had their kids and found they couldn't buy on their own. They're moving back home and going back to college, going to trade school. So they're using that savings to better themselves and better our society.
Hmm.
I'm seeing a lot of that. I didn't see that 4 and 5 and 10 years ago.
Well, I love hearing that people are going back to trade school
Yeah.
because I think the whole idea of going to college for the traditional BA degree and all the other various degrees you can get, most of it is not going to provide you any value other than just having that additional education. But real world value as far as, well, your pay, occupation, there's so many variables that go into it that a college cannot guarantee you. And the problem is, look at student loan debt.
Mm.
Now we're at $1.5 trillion, where 90% of that is guaranteed by the government. What do you think is going to have to happen here in the next few years? If a student loan cannot be paid, can they qualify for a home mortgage?
That's an interesting concept. The government just answered that question last year. There is now a program where they will roll your student mortgage into your purchase of a new property on a Fannie Mae loan. Give you guys a plug. You want to know how it works? Give me a call. You have my information. But they see exactly that. They saw that the student loan debt was so much that was prohibiting a lot of millennials from going on to buy a home. So there's now a program you're going to actually borrow more than the house is worth. You're going to wipe out your student loan. It's going to be rolled into your mortgage because they guess what? They think you're going to pay your mortgage over anything else. Let's face it, how many student loans go into default? How many
Mhm.
student loans, when things get in trouble, people stop paying their student loan? And so the government has a program for that now. And it's only been out maybe 18 months, maybe a little bit less. But
So
yeah, it
no one
is
knows
out
about
there.
it. This is the first time I've heard about it.
Yeah, it's out there. It exists because we know it's here, especially in our market where a lot of people are going back for their master's degrees. They got the first degree, then they got a good job, then all of a sudden they hit the glass ceiling. You can't go to the next level unless you get your master's. So they're like, all right, now I'm going to go to grad school. Now I'm going to tack on another, 50, 60, $70,000 in debt to get my master's. I will get my promotion down the road. But the government figures you already owe them the money. You're going to be borrowing on your house from us anyway. It's the same lender.
Hmm.
It's the same lender. So there is a way to do it. Doesn't work for everybody. You have to have shown your financial responsibility in the past. But they're also gambling that you're doing this for a reason and you're going to be making more money in the future. And they do want to help you.
Well, that's something that you and I need to work on putting out there a lot more because honestly, if it's been around 18 months, is legit the first time I've heard of it.
Yeah.
So I'm like shocked right now that it even exists because there's so many people, and I myself included thought, well, if you have student loan debt, there's no way you can qualify for a mortgage because you have to have that paid off or at least making monthly payments on it, to qualify for a mortgage. I mean, it counts against your
And you are
qualifications.
right. They haven't talked about this either. They've actually made qualifying with a student loan harder than it used to be. Because the student loan, often what your payment is, isn't what you're paying. They do this income-based repayment schedules and deferred payments because you're going back to school. But yeah, you say it's deferred, but me as a lender, I got to count it. I don't get to give you the lower payment based on the different programs because I think they're really trying to get people to roll into this new program that's out there.
So I wonder if that's going to be a way that the government solves that entire issue because $1.5 trillion worth of debt that 90% is backed by the government is pretty scary to think about when you figure out, well, what if these start to default just the same way that mortgages defaulted 2007, 8, 9? And so what would be the solution to it? And there's a lot of fear out there that, well, there's going to have to be some major congressional package put together to fix this entire problem. And then how's this going to affect? I mean, would it affect the banks that actually lent the money out?
No, because they'd now be getting paid off as
It's
it rolled
guaranteed,
into the
right?
mortgage. So
Yeah,
they're back in. Not even a guarantee. They're paid.
they're paid.
It
Right?
gets
Okay.
rolled into the new loan. The new loan goes into a Fannie Mae Freddie Mac pool and is then bought. Fannie and Freddie are still quasi government agencies backed by the taxpayers of America. Remember, that's why we bailed out the housing industry last time. We were on the hook before. So that's sort of the idea. If they're already on the hook for the student loan, and we're going to be on the hook for the mortgage, why don't we let them get together? And there is still this sentiment out there, not everybody agrees, but that homeowners make better citizens. They tend to pay their taxes. They tend to be more responsible. They tend to vote. They tend to, take better access to the healthcare system. They're healthier. All these things, that they think home ownership does that you and I both know has been proven in many cases. But there's some people that still don't think it. And there's places in the world where people don't own homes. Most of Europe is, lifetime leases type thing with no actual ownership. But this is where we're going, and I do think that with the right ideas here, if we're on the hook for the dead anyway, let's see if we can get them into houses, make them a stable family, and let them continue to grow, continue their education, continue to prosper within our society. And this is one of the answers I've come up with. My oldest daughter just got married, as I was telling you, just less than 2 months ago. Now, her big fear is that she's got a great job. She's works for the bar association, very high level. Her husband's got a good job, but to get her current job, she had to go back and get her master's. And with the government job, they don't even take an MBA like I have. They want to mess the public administration because it's not business money; it's the government's money, the people's money. So they have their own degree now for you. And so she had to go find an MPA. I think she has one class left, and she'll graduate. But she goes, I'm afraid to tell you because, yeah, we want to buy a house, we want to start the family, but I have this student loan debt out there. What am I going to do with it? So we're going to be having these conversations over the holidays. I'm going to sit down with her and figure out how we can put these pieces together. And if it's not today, I can put her on a plan 6, 12 months down the road. I'm sure she'll get to be where she wants to be.
Very interesting. We'll have to talk more about this after the podcast
Yes.
because we need to get this like news out to people more.
Mhm.
Let them know that hey, maybe not everyone can qualify for a mortgage, but a big chunk of you can,
Mhm.
and that'll be a big giant relief to get rid of that student debt by rolling it into the mortgage. But my concern with that would be, well, if you're going back to 100% financing or possibly even more, well, everything's great when people are making payments. What about this looming recession that people keep talking about? We're looking at a recession in 2020. You're starting to see banks and big corporations starting to readjust. The one that made the news recently that Trump ended up bashing online is GM.
Mhm.
And they're announcing the big layoffs of thousands of people, mainly uh, certain factories and high up executives. And so basically people that are not bringing a lot of value to the company, they're looking at them saying, okay, we're going to get rid of these people and we're going to prepare ahead of time for this looming recession. Now you have Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase saying, hey, we see a recession coming in 2020. Goldman Sachs is on the same bandwagon. You have CNN chief economists also on the same bandwagon. So you're seeing a lot of people seeing more and more evidence, and I'm sure part of it that's feeding it are the current Fed rate hikes, the negative news, the stock
Mm-hmm.
market right now where we've lost, like you said, all the gains for this year. A lot of that also feeds into it. So, but you still have a lot of smart people talking about a 2020 recession, and there are some banks that are pulling away from certain types of loan financing and packages. But when you hear that, I think for most people, they think, oh, well, mortgages are going away or different types of loans are going away. I mean, what are you seeing? I mean, have you seen actual certain mortgage packages disappear?
I've
Because,
seen the exact opposite. I've seen different banks looking at the risk reward analysis that you're talking about that are actually going out there and bring out more creative packages. We just recently rolled it out. I hadn't even told you about it yet. We have a 100% financing option now, not through the state bond agency anymore, but through one of our partner banks. Got to be highly qualified, got to have extremely high credit scores, got to have good debt to income ratio. But they're getting to the points like just because you don't have a down payment doesn't mean you shouldn't be a homeowner. Yeah, yes, we've always had the bond issues that we can do. You and I have done some of those over the years together. But now it's like, hey, the bond issues, though, they're income based. They're based on the size of the family. They're based on the geographic area you're at. It's like, no, if you're, we'll give it to you if you're a quality person. And we're seeing more and more of these, I want to call boutique mortgages, where they're going to start cherry picking, allowing people to get into the market. Now, back to what you said about the recession. Everything you said is correct. I've been following a lot of this, and you and I have had plenty of conversations ourselves. But the housing market will never collapse the way it did before. First of all, we know 10% of all mortgages go bad. That's just the number: death, divorce, injury, illness, whatever. 10% go bad. That's built into the market. The second part of that is everybody that got a house in this economy at the time they got the house could afford it. Unlike what happened in the past, what we called the liar loans, people just make up. Everybody I knew was either a dog walker or a gardener.
stated documentation.
Stated document. Give me 6 letters from clients you mow their lawn, and we'll give you a stated income, self-employed loan, even though it's not on your tax returns. Those days are gone. Those days are done. They're buried. You must now provide some form of documentation to get a loan. They are getting more flexible. There's no real true stated income loans yet in the A paper world. There is some hybrids out there, different things, but they're going back to bank statement loans to self-employed people. Let's look at the cash flow you put through your business bank account for the last 24 months, and let's see how much of that you're actually pulling out and putting into your personal bank account rather than just deferring to the tax return. So there are more creative stuff. They are now loosening up. And the other part, people freak out when I say this: a 10% pullback is not a recession, it's a pullback. This happens all the time. And as you pointed out, this is the longest, bull run that we've had in, since World War II.
It was a 10-year run.
Yeah, it's been a huge run. I mean, yes, we went down the toilet last time. And of course, everybody on the aisle just pointed fingers at each other, and we've gone back and realized, yeah, they all did it. So yeah, they all did it. So we can't get too much into that, but there may be a slight recession. But that means if my house is worth 500,000 now and I have a 10% reduction back, I'm down to 450. But if my interest rate goes up more than 3/4 of a point, I'm actually paying more for that house than I would have when I bought it at 500 with a lower interest rate. So that's where most people don't see the different pieces as they float together. And I know there's a lot of fear out there of, well, I want the prices to come down. But the price comes down and the rate goes up, the two come together to give you your payment. And it's not what people think it is. It's going to be pretty close to what it is now. Unfortunately, this is the case where the seniors are going to be the ones, a lot of them that want to sell and move out of California, retire to a cheaper part of the country, may not get that extra bump on what they sell for. But at the same time, that's actually who took all the money the last time. No one wants to talk about it. But they all thought the banks got the money. We've seen the numbers. Jamie Dimon and them, they didn't get the money. They almost lost everything. We had to bail them out. It was the people that sold the properties at those super high values that took that cash and ran with it. And most of them were our seniors. It is what it is. That's the way the system was built back then, and it all comes full circle. But I don't think housing prices, unless you're paying cash, are going to have a major effect. If they come down, rates come up, your payment's going to be about the same. And in reality, people only ask me two questions: what does it cost me to move in, my investment, and what is my monthly investment, my payment, to stay here every month? And that's really all they want to care about. They all get caught up in interest rates and sales prices and this and that, but it's a teeter totter. It rocks two sides. They always want to take teeter totter and break it. Well, I want the lowest payment, I want the lowest fees, I want the lowest price, and normally the stars don't align that way.
Yeah.
You know.
What about HELOCs?
So HELOCs, for example, my bank won't do HELOCs outside of the state of Texas where we're located. We do HELOCs with some partners for purchase money only. HELOCs are an interesting thing.
Are you seeing other banks pull away from HELOCs?
I've seen a lot of banks pull away from HELOCs, and most people I know don't want HELOCs anymore. Most people don't know in the Trump tax code, HELOCs are no longer tax deductible unless you meet certain criteria. And the biggest part of that criteria is every penny from the HELOC must go into the property, either a purchase or a renovation. So in theory, if you pulled $100 out and went to dinner, you may have jeopardized your ability to do the tax deduction on your interest. Talk to your tax person. I'm not the expert on that, but that's the way the law is written. Used to be HELOCs were always tax deductible. Old HELOCs, existing HELOCs before the tax plan was signed, all grandfathered in, they're still the same. New HELOCs are not, which is why I'm seeing a lot of people that want to renovate their house coming to me for renovation loans. And we're doing a renovation package together because now it's all tax deductible. Biggest problem I have is I got 3.75 right now, and I don't want to give that up and go to 4.75. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. And it's like, yeah, now I got to look at the tax consequences, and the new HELOC wouldn't give you that, and you need the money now. It's all tax deductible, and so you got to take all the. It's like playing a game of poker. You got to look at all the cards in your hand and put together the winning hand. So the rules have changed, but a lot of banks have pulled back. HELOCs used to have crazy banks that go to 100%. They're pretty much capped at about 80. And if you don't have at least 680, and some banks 720, they don't want to give you a HELOC.
So just to explain for the people listening, what is a HELOC? It's a home equity line of credit. That's essentially what it stands for. Okay, so yeah, it's interesting to see how the HELOC market is working. Now, are those rates really based on the 10-year treasury, or are those
Prime plus?
Prime plus? Okay, and that's what's affected by the Fed rate hikes.
Absolutely. So right now, the prime rate, last time I checked was, I think Thursday last week, was like 5.25. So if you're a prime plus one, prime plus two, you're 6.25, 7.25. And the other part of a HELOC that most people don't realize is in the beginning, like most of them for the first 10 years, you pay interest only. And it's adjustable. So if the rates go up, it's going to keep going up too. And after 10 years, you have not paid one dime on what you owe, what you bought. So that's why I sit down and I do financial analysis with people, and they come to me because most people that come to me now that want a HELOC, at least they've got away from the mentality of I want to buy a boat, I want to buy a jet ski, I want to go on vacation. Now it's I want to fix up my house. It's been 10 years. I haven't put a lot of stuff in my house. I'm renovating my house right now as we speak. I got a guy out down there putting in a new chandelier in my foyer. And they want to put the money back into the house. I'm like, so good. That's one that's still tax deductible if every penny goes into the house. But by the time we do the analysis and the what's the term, volatility of an adjustable rate, because HELOCs do not come with a locked in rate. You will be prime plus. If prime goes up, it goes up no matter what. My old HELOC that I had that I still haven't paid off yet is unadjustable. I was paying 24 months ago $700 a month on it. With these rate increases, I am now paying a little over $1,000 a month on the same balance.
Wow.
Yeah. Literally, that's 40%.
Yeah.
40%. So the volatility of a HELOC is not tolerable to most people. So I'm finding most people, if they really want it for renovation, my renovation loans are much better. Now, if you need it for debt consolidation, that's another story. That's a case by case basis. They're a tool that I think can help a lot of people, but it's not like it was in the old days. Just go throw HELOC on your house, buy a new car, go on vacation, pay for your kids' college, and don't worry about it.
Yeah, this is why I say it's very important to talk to the right loan officer, the right loan officer that can sit down and run the options with you. One thing I do with every property management client is that when they come to meet with me and I sit down to discuss their property, I'm not just telling them, oh, yeah, here's what we do. I'm telling them, here's what we do, and here's what you can do with the property and the various options, whether they have an on site manager, maybe no on site manager, um, whatever the makeup of the building is. But
Mhm.
we explain to them all their options and what's possible. And at that point, they can then decide what they want to do. Sometimes with some properties, it makes sense to exchange them out, even though you have good cash flow. But if you have a high tax liability, sell it, exchange it out into another property that could be the same amount of cash flow, but because it's a newer property, higher tax basis, you have less of a tax liability at the end
Less
of the day.
maintenance. There's a lot of things in
Correct.
that.
There's a lot of
Yes.
things. So you really have to sit down with a professional that can understand how to look at the entire package, what your options are, break it down for you, and then at that point you can make a good, sound financial decision on what you want to do. And I think it's really important for people to sit down with professionals, and that's why I really like having you on the show here because there's so much that you break down and then really just teach people. I mean, that's what I think
Well,
is really important.
I was taught in business school, and my friend Amria Demars Rousey, Ronda Rousey's mom, says that basically there's two types of information out in the world that people have it. There are those that want to share like you and I do, and there's those that want to hoard and don't want to do it. We're sharers. We like to help people, we like to tell people things, let them make their own informed decision, but let them know what the real things are going on. Like you even heard me talk about, I know as much about the tax code as I can, but still go check with your tax professional. Don't take my word on it. Like I've got people now that are looking at buying investment properties. And I'm going to start referring more of them to you that are looking for the multi units because I know you do the full analysis, the full spreadsheet. It's not like, oh, like what you get off the MLS. Half of them in the MLS don't even tell you what the expenses are. These are what
Yeah.
they rent for. And it's like, how can even a really good realtor who doesn't specialize in this do the type of analysis that you do? It's just not possible.
I ran into a client who's in the process of buying a fourplex, and on the MLS, all the financial figures are completely wrong to the point where I think the agent doesn't really understand what those financial figures meant or what they were supposed to put there.
Mm.
Because, for example, the deposits didn't match up with the deposits that was on the lease agreement
Mm-hmm.
or what the owner claimed they had, which that should be an easy one. You total up all the deposits and put that figure into the deposit field, right?
Right.
But even that was wrong. Or they had annual utilities for an owner that pays water and garbage as $800 for the entire year. It's like, come on, fourplex, water and garbage is not going to be
Or
$800.
what that means is it's a little old man who's managing it himself. He's throwing the stuff in the back of his truck and taking it down to the trash dumpster, down to the landfill himself. Those are the kind of things that people without talking to you won't know. And, that's why, we have a client right now we're working with where you happen to be his property manager. He's hands off. He loves you, does everything. Yeah, he could make in a couple $100 a month more if he did his self management. He doesn't want to. He's a professional. He's working on his family. He's working on his life. You're running his business for him.
One of the benefits of giving your property over to a property manager is that you're hiring essentially a full-time person to manage your property, but without paying a full-time salary to anyone, right? It's kind of like a pool. If enough property owners get together and give one manager enough units to pay for their salary, they're able to manage everyone's property effectively, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically like a pool. You're just pulling your properties together to pay a manager. They take care of all your properties. If you take that property away to manage it yourself, how many hours are you spending every single month? If you're spending 10 hours to save 150 bucks, you're essentially paying yourself $15 an hour. Well, what if you're a professional or someone that is making 40, 50, 100 bucks an hour to then go to $15 an hour just to manage your property just to save 150 bucks? That doesn't make financial sense.
No.
So that's another thing too I break down for people is, yeah, okay, you want to manage your own property, that's fine. Here's what we can do for you, and we're going to do it better because this is what we do as a professional.
And here's what I'm starting to teach some of my millennials as well as some of my retirees. They're looking at the retirees are looking at selling their single family. They need to downsize, like you talked about, and they want a 3 or 4 unit building. So they want to move in the building and live there themselves. That's great. I said, now, do you want to manage this yourself or you want to hire a professional? Do you want everybody in the complex to know you're the owner? So the toilet backs up at 2 in the morning, they're knocking on your door? Or do you want them to have your 24-hour-a-day handyman that could pick up the phone and go out there and take care of it for them? I said, you don't even have to let people know you own the building, you know? And for the young people, you buy the multi-unit building first. You create the income, you get it professionally managed. No, you may not be making any profit off of it, but then when you're ready to buy the single family home, you've already got your property manager. Now when you rent out that other unit, now you're going to start turning a profit and you can now go buy your single family. You buy the single family first, it's a lot harder to buy the unit building.
Correct. I tell that to so many people. It's like, oh, I want to buy a house. I'm like, great. Is this your first house? Yes. Great. Don't buy a house. I'm the only realtor that tells people to not buy a house.
Right.
I'm the only one that tells
Because you're
people,
locked up.
I'm like, don't buy a house, period. Don't buy a house. And people tell you're the only person in the real estate business that tells us not to buy real estate. And I tell them, I'm not telling you to not buy real estate. Just don't buy a house. Instead, go out and buy a duplex, triplex, fourplex, whatever you can buy. Move into one unit, especially if you're renting an apartment right now. It's essentially just you move to a different apartment and then buy a triplex or fourplex, live there for a year or two, save up the money, save up the profits, whatever you can, then go out and preferably go buy another one. You do this every 2 years after a 10-year period that goes by really fast in life. After 10 years, you own 3, 4, 5 fourplexes.
I'm going to tell you about this one client I had last year. I helped him buy his 5th unit this year. He's a mailman. He makes $60,000 a year. He's been doing your techniques the entire time. His cousin is his realtor and helped him do exactly what you're doing. He now owns a 3-plex, a 4-plex, and 2 single families, of which he only lives in one. And he buys them, throws every penny into them, pays them down to a point. Then he re-leverages one so he can then buy another one.
Mm-hmm.
And then he makes that one cash flow. Once that one's doing, he'll eventually pull equity to go buy another one. He's been buying a new property about every 36 months for the past, 15 years. The guy makes $60,000 a year. Outstanding credit, extremely financially responsible, but it can be done. This guy's net worth, again, a postman that makes $60,000 a year is $1.4 million.
Yeah. And then what you do.
He's buying in Solano County. He's not buying here. He's buying to the next county over from us. But he knows what he's doing. He likes what he's doing, and he has it professionally managed.
Yeah, and at some point, though, instead of holding on to all these, let's say, fourplex units, you then sell them and exchange them into one larger unit that might be 30, 40, 50 units. Yes. And now, at that point, for most people, they might be okay because even with financing, they might be cash flowing 10, 15 grand per month. You're set at that point. You're set. And then if you still have your job of 60,000, even better. You're not forced. Maybe you decide to work part-time at your main job and just enjoy life, travel, take a vacation, once a month for a week and whatever you want to do. But it's that sacrifice of just, okay, I'm going to build this up for 10 or 15 years.
See, you hit the key word there, and I don't think people say that often enough. Sacrifice. What is an investment? An investment is sacrificing today's dollar for a future gain. And it can be based anything in life, quality of life, time, whatever. But you need to invest things. And most people understand that the beginning of investment is sacrifice. What am I going to give up today so I can have a better tomorrow? And I think that's a message that really needs to get out there. It is not as hard as people think. If you work in the city, maybe you don't go to Starbucks every day. Maybe you don't get your clothes dry cleaned, every time you wear it.
Maybe sacrifice is the wrong word because when you think of sacrifice, you think of
it's negative.
It's negative. It's something big, something that's gonna hurt you in your soul, right?
Right.
And you know what? If you don't
we're not nailed to a cross, we're not the sacrifice.
And not going to Starbucks every day might hurt some people's souls out there.
Right. Yeah, it is. I understand. And actually, some people that don't get their morning coffee, you don't want to be around them.
Yeah.
So,
I gotta have coffee every day, but I'm all about the either a 10-cent pod or just make the big pot of coffee
right.
and then just drink that. Yeah, I'm not out spending $4 or $5 a
But
day on
I
coffee.
actually do like the idea of sacrifice. I think part of what we need to do is we need to re-educate them on what that really means.
Mhm.
You are sacrificing for an investment. I think we need to connect the dots to them. I don't think we want to take the word sacrifice away. Because yes, you do have to give something up, but you're going to get something in return.
Yeah, and I think the amazing thing to think about is I believe what's the life expectancy right now in the US? It's like 77, 78 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about kids that are being born today might have a chance where their average life expectancy is going to be a little bit over 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. So to simply sacrifice or maybe modify how you
78 as of 2016.
78.
There you go.
So
You're
maybe
a whole year off.
yeah. So maybe if you just modify your spending to save some money to
Correct.
then get into
That
that,
being said, it is trending downwards
it's trending downwards.
In the U.S.
in the U.S. Yes.
Yeah. In the
Oh,
US.
but not elsewhere in the world.
Russia average age for a man is only 58 at death.
So
It-
the
it-
vodka.
Well, when you're under that regime, you got to have a drink or two.
Women, it's up to 81 though.
Yeah.
Yeah, women always live longer for sure.
They
That's
don't,
always
they don't do as much stupid stuff as men do.
well,
You know, yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah.
but there's a second part of that for insurance. I had an insurance license years ago. Women's medical insurance is always much more than men, and life insurance was less because women go to the doctor more often than men do, and women live longer. So we'll charge the men less for their medical because they don't use it, and we'll charge them more for that because they're going to die sooner. And women are the exact opposite way. All the smart people have all the analysis of this. They have all the algorithms. They know the trends.
Yeah, it's all a numbers game. Yeah. Okay, so if we're trending downwards though, but technology is improving at such a great pace that with the right technology, or if you have enough money to afford that technology, you could live a lot longer.
Mhm.
So, but let's okay, 78.
I think the reason it's trending down though, I'm glancing through a Washington Post article.
Trump?
It's no. Possibly. It's a lot of suicide and drug overdoses though. That's those have been on the rise, and so that's obviously going to lower the life expectancy. People aren't just dropping dead sooner.
Okay, so then
They're
I think
doing something
so
to
then-
themselves.
Mental health
so then
issues.
yeah, so then maybe what we need to do to we need to look up what's the life expectancy without those included. Like just like how long can a human live for? I mean, we don't need to look it up right now, but
I mean,
that would be
it
the
would
actual
be a probably pretty significant difference.
Yeah.
Per 100,000 people who die, 22% of them are suicides. This is among males.
22%.
22% of every 100,000 deaths for men are suicides versus 6.1 for females. Drug overdoses per 100,000 deaths, 29% of those are drug overdoses for men, 14.4% for women.
Wow. So if you look at deaths
As of 2017.
So if you look at deaths just from natural causes
Mhm.
or old age, I wonder how that would then change the life expectancy. I would imagine we're in the 80s at that point.
I think the problem, I agree with you. I think the problem is that Sam's coming up with a lot of this data is skewed towards a certain perspective, and they're trying to tell a story as they pull it together.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of this is mental health issues.
Yeah.
For example, we have a close family friend who technically committed suicide a few years ago, but it was medically assisted suicide. She had cancer for the fourth time, and she was never going to get better. And so she sat down with her family, and her doctors decided, I will not put my family through a fourth round of me doing this. And that skews those numbers. And unfortunately, I do think some of the medical limitations we have out there, and some of these medical limitations are based on our country and our government. Other parts of the world have treatments we don't have here yet, and it's illegal to do some of these treatments. I've got a friend of mine who owns a very famous jiu-jitsu school in Berkeley who wanted to have real stem cell, not the stuff that we're doing here on his knees.
You have to go
Now,
to China or Panama for that.
He actually went to Costa Rica.
Oh,
Yeah, so
Costa
he
Rica's
already-
doing it now.
Yeah, he already had the 2 hips replaced. He had his shoulder replaced, and he was not ready to do the knee replacement surgery. He goes, that I think I can do. Cost him $21,000. He flew down to Costa Rica. They put him up in a 4-star hotel. They performed the procedures on both knees. He stayed there for 10 days under their care and then came back. And he goes, I feel like I have brand new knees. But the real stem cell that he had done is still illegal in the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have these quasi ones, but it's not the same.
Yeah, I saw a great documentary. I don't know if I want to say it was Vice, but it might not have been.
I
But
love Vice.
yeah, they were talking. The documentary was covering stem cells and procedures in China,
Mhm.
and how over there they let you as a business, okay, do what you want, but then we'll figure out the ethicalness of everything after the fact, right? And so what they were essentially doing, and there were they were tracking Americans that would fly to China to these specific companies
Mhm.
that would literally take their stem cells out, their blood DNA, and grow stem cells in whatever organ they needed or whatever the case was in a lab. And they'd say, okay, come back to China in 3 months. They come back to China and then they have what they needed to then properly treat them.
Mhm.
And to see some people that couldn't walk and then they were walking, and it was just incredible to see like the results. And you're seeing not just China, but you have in Panama, Costa Rica now, and I'm sure there's a lot of other places that you can also get it done.
Mhm.
Why it's not here in the US or not being allowed is mind-boggling. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean,
Yeah.
you have the FDA that's extremely strict when it comes to certain trials and regulations, that sort of thing. There's also an argument to be said for that hey, we don't want people going crazy and just using humans as lab babies or lab rats to
Right.
come up with all kinds of stuff. But then at the same time, where's the balance? Because hey, we're kind of behind on a lot of these techniques and procedures. I mean, look at the lung cancer vaccine that Cuba has had for so many years.
Mhm.
That US, for whatever reason, hasn't even bothered to test it for so many years until just this year that they announced, and it was like 3 months ago, where they announced the first company, I
Clinical
think,
trials. Yeah.
yeah, in New York City to do clinical trials on a very small batch of people to see if this is really effective. Well, you know what? Americans have been going to Cuba, sneaking over there to
Mhm.
get this and bring it, and they've been smuggling back
Well, it's so
to
funny because
survive.
you for a long time you can't now. Before Obama, though, you could not fly directly to Cuba, but it was amazing. I'd go into Toronto, Canada, and all they had was signs to go into Cuba. So they would go to Toronto and the fly from Toronto in. And as you said, people were getting around this. And one of my best friends, he's an immigration attorney down in San Diego. He's on the border wall trying to help people down there all the time. But he used to live in Oregon, and he got overweight. And he came down with terrible diabetes, and actually sold his legal practice and stuff he had here, went down to Dominican Republic for 5 years, lived a clean diet down there, got rid of his diabetes, came back here at the 90 days on the American diet. He started getting diabetes again and started to put on like 30 pounds. So he decided to go for the lap band. So to do it here with the insurance he had, it was going to cost him $38,000 through the insurance. His portion was $5,000. He did the research. Tijuana now has an entire medical complex down there. The same manufacturer, I want to say it was Merck, that created the lap banded here, had a clinic down there. He went to the manufacturer's clinic, got the entire procedure done for $2,800, and came back.
Wow.
Now that's $2,200 less than what his copay would have been, much less the entire medical bill. So our medical system is broken in many ways, and I think that's going to be one of the next things. Everyone's talking about the real estate collapse or the stock market collapse. The medical, and also I think, as we talked about earlier, the education system. Everyone's got to get a college degree, master's, PhD, trade schools.
Well,
Those are issues.
one of the biggest criticisms of the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, was that it wasn't going to fix the problem.
Right.
Is that, yeah, you're just modifying insurance rules. Guess what? Insurance is all based on numbers. It's still a numbers game. So if the cost goes up, you're still going to have overall costs go up. And that was one of the biggest criticisms. And you saw a lot of costs go up, or deductibles just extremely high for some people.
It
I
ruined
mean,
Kaiser.
I
It
knew
ruined
if
Kaiser for us.
I knew a few people that were excited because Obamacare came out and it passed and this and that, and now they can get insurance and they can afford the monthly costs. Great. Their first monthly visit, $250 copay that they could not afford. Then they were like, "Oh, this is not what we
Coverage
thought."
does not mean access.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And the biggest criticism was that, hey, this is not going to fix the healthcare system. What we need to do is fix the costs within the
Correct.
healthcare system, which is why, I mean, there were so many studies that show US healthcare costs are the highest in the world. So
Mhm.
why don't we fix that? Why are we going to fix the insurance that pays it? Because if those costs go up, guess what? I don't care if it's the most affordable insurance ever. They're going to raise their costs to cover the basic level. I mean, it's just simple. It's simple math.
We had a kid that goes to our church and was in the church softball league, and we went on the father son camping trip. I have my Suburban. I load a bunch of people in there, and same thing. So he had an abusive father, left the house. So it was him and his brother taking care of their mother, and he blows a knee out during a church softball game. He works at Home Depot, has coverage through Obamacare to get his knee redone. His out of pocket expense was going to be $3,800. He didn't have it. 2 years later, he's still not had his surgery. He is still suffering. He goes, I don't have $3,800. He goes, everything I do, I take care of my family, my mother. We're a unit. I'm not at that point in my life. He was 19 when this happened. He's going on 22 now. He goes, I just don't have $3,800 that I can go through. I'll just suck it up until, you know, hopefully one of these days it'll come together. But he
So
had insurance.
yeah. So when you think about some of these deductibles being even a couple $100, right? For basic appointments, or what if you go to the doctor? Let's say it's $200 deductible, but then you need medicine after. Now it's $100 deductible. Well, that's $300. There was a uh, report that just came out a few months ago. What's the percentage of Americans, if you ask them for $300 right now, whether it's in your bank account, cash, credit card access, if you have $300, can you afford a $300 cost right now? It was something crazy, like 55, 60% of Americans don't have that.
I heard the different number. I heard $1,000 number, and it was 70% of Americans
Yeah,
do not have $1,000 disposable cash sitting somewhere right now today
correct.
to cover any car repair, medical expense, nothing.
So when you have that data, what makes you think an insurance plan with a deductible of even a couple $100 makes sense? It doesn't make sense. And that was the biggest criticism, is that, hey, we have to fix healthcare costs, not the insurance, nothing else. Because, and it was funny too, because remember Wall Street when people were protesting the one percenters?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the majority of the one percenters are in healthcare, pharmaceutical, and guess what? Doctors.
Right.
Now obviously we need doctors, but it just kind of shows you that healthcare is very profitable.
Mm-hmm.
They're the top one percenters, and it's really not the Wall Street people. Yes, there's some of those in the top 1%, but most of them are not.
Right.
And so and so it was all very skewed. So anyway, um, my point, we got completely off track here, but
It's okay.
going back to what I originally was saying about the life expectancy,
Mm-hmm.
is that life is long, but time goes by really fast. And so a simple 10 or 15 year sacrifice goes by so fast. I've been in the business 15 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and it went by so fast. Now looking back, I'm like, man, I've gone through so much in the last 15 years, and I have so many more years left to go in this business. It's incredible. But a simple 10 to 15 year sacrifice, or maybe not a sacrifice, just adjustment of spending, and then you own, let's say, 20, 24 units that are all fourplexes. Now it's time to exchange them out into maybe a bigger complex that's going to make me cash flow me 10 to 15 grand per month. That's a pretty sweet deal.
Going to your point, these numbers are antiquated, they're old, but I remember years ago I had an insurance license. They were looking at a universal life, whole life, so forth. You just a 401k. And if somebody took when they were 21 years old and they put in $2,000 a year into their retirement vehicle by the time they turned 35, and they never put another dime in after that, and then you started at 35 and paid until retirement age of, let's say, 60, The one that did it earlier ends up with more money in the bank with compounding than the one that starts later in life, even though they put more cash out of their pocket. And that was a proven statistic. So yeah, earlier you do it, the better you do it. If you're a farmer, you got to plant seeds. You don't plant seeds, you get no crops. I mean, it's pretty simple. But in the capitalist world we live in, I think one of the biggest failures of our education system is we don't teach anybody what capitalism means.
Hmm.
We don't teach them how to make money. We don't teach them anything else. But we'll sure teach them to go to the car dealership and they'll give you the keys to the car that day. And now you took away your ability possibly to buy a property for another year or two because you just took on a $700, $800 a month payment.
Well, there's a few really big entrepreneurs that they say this all the time that school fails entrepreneurs every day. It fails a capitalist. Well, maybe it doesn't fail a capitalist system because what schooling really does is it breeds and creates great workers,
Mm-hmm.
but it does nothing to teach about capitalism, entrepreneurship, how to build a business. And then you have the few select people that go out and create a business, they're able to kind of break through. But that's,
And then also, don't let everybody tell you no, you can't do it, because those are the people that never did it.
yeah,
You'll never hear somebody who's done it tell you you can't do it. The only people that tell you can't do it are the ones that have never did it and probably never will. And that's hard. That's what's so hard about our society. But
you have to be
we,
okay with failure.
yeah, more is won and lost from the wrong decision than indecision. Indecision, you learn nothing. Wrong decision, all right, I did that wrong. Let me learn from that and I'll go do it right next time. Most people are indecisive. They don't do anything. They don't take the gambles. They don't take their, and they listen to everybody around them telling them, no, you can't do this. And still, like I say, I'll give you my little elevator speech here. Lanny Clark of Prime Lending. I sell the American dream, home ownership and wealth creation through real estate. Contact me and I'll help you. We have tools and stuff in this country that nowhere else in the world they have. I can help them home ownership. You can help them with building a portfolio that can take on for generations. I mean, when you build a real estate portfolio, that's willable. You can give that to your kids, your grandkids, or anybody. People don't understand that. And most people are told you can't do it. And you're not going to get it from the guy on the infomercial at night. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You got to come see guys like you and I. We're out here. We exist. There are other great people out there too. We're not the only ones, but we are few and far between.
I would say we're the best in this area.
I would too. I would. Well, let's face it. Most people don't do the in-depth analysis and look at what's really best someone's client. We answer, I want to buy a house, but is that really your best interest? Let's give you another couple things to think about first, and then we'll
Exactly.
talk about it.
So let's go ahead and wrap up this podcast. We've got Christmas time coming up
Mhm.
here. So couple questions is what are your favorite or top 3 Christmas songs?
Oh well, that's tough.
Because if you put on 96.5 right now, it's nonstop Christmas right after, like from Black Friday to Christmas Day.
So Trans-Siberian Orchestra has that whole Christmassy techno vibe. I really like a lot of their stuff. My daughters grew up dancing in the El Cerrito Ballet Academy to the Nutcracker, so of course the Nutcracker songs, the whole score, just touches my heart. Um, and then I love Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Sorry.
That's the
Yeah.
child in you.
Yeah, that's a child of me. You got to still be a child. That's the one that still warms my heart every time I hear
Yeah.
it. But yeah, those would be my 3.
Yeah, that song actually, I like it too because every time I hear that song, I think of me being 5, 6 years old, right like at my grandmother's house, sitting in front of the TV. Every time we were over there during the holiday season, she would put the VHS tape in, and
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of people
Oh,
here,
we're old. VHS.
yeah, VHS. Oh my god. So, Skylar, my stepdaughter,
Mm-hmm.
asked me like a while back, what a Blu-ray disc was and what a Blu-ray player was. I had to explain it to her, and then she's like, "Why wouldn't you just stream it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but that just shows you like the technology how fast." Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. So I just remember my grandmother playing that VHS every single time during the holiday season. So I like that song. It's a great movie too.
So I got to cheat here, and my family will probably get mad at me, but I probably already got my best Christmas present already. Did you see my Facebook page this week?
I saw you with Ronda Rousey.
I was with Rhonda. Rhonda gave us 8 tickets for the whole family, second row, to her
Very
pay-per-view.
cool.
And then to go backstage with her and all the athletes and take photos, and that's a good one.
That's very cool.
The
It's
whole
very cool.
family. My daughters my daughters grew up with Rhonda. I coached them all internationally and so forth. But my daughters hadn't seen Rhonda probably in 5 or 6 years. You know, I got to go to her wedding last year, and I've been closer to her. But this is the happiest I've ever seen her.
Very nice.
Yeah,
Very cool.
I can't wait for Martha.
I follow her on Instagram, and it seems like she's having a blast with the WWE. I mean, just
she
like
is
so much
doing
fun.
this only because she wants to.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's something other people have to learn. She did her path. We can help them do that. Their real estate. She has enough money. She doesn't have to do this. She does it because she wants to, and she loves it. Can you imagine if everyone got to do what they wanted to because they love to?
Yeah. It's an incredible thing.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing.
So what are your favorite Christmas movies?
Of course, you got to go with Christmas Story all the time. You know, you can't get away from that one.
Don't shoot your eye out.
I was a BB gun kid, so yeah, that really related to me. I don't know. I love Die Hard. Got to go a little bit the other way, and probably what's the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sinbad?
Jingle
All the way.
Jingle all the way. That's another. Yeah, like I got a little bit of everything there in my 3.
My favorite has to be National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
That was good.
And just because
I used to watch that every year for Christmas. That was
Yeah.
our family tradition, was watching that one.
yeah, and that's because every time I watch it, I'm like, okay, that's my uncle, that's my aunt, that's my cousin. I'm like, I know everyone there. So, Lanny, thanks for coming on to the podcast. Great having you on the show. Someone wants to do business. What's the best way for them to contact you?
Best way is always my cell phone, which is 510-410-7572. The other thing is you can go to my website, which is Team Lanny Clark, LANNYCLARK.com. All sorts of information about me, all sorts of information about my programs. My cell phone number is on there, so if you didn't write it down, again, Team Lanny, LANNY Clark.com, because, you know, that's just who I am and what I do, and I wish everyone a happy holiday.
Awesome. Happy holidays to you too.
Okay.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Sam Lubman. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Google Play, SoundCloud, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For more information on my business as a property manager and real estate team, go visit my website at marcguzman.com. I really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.